it's weird to me to think that of all the kind of big franchises and big films that came out in the 1970s and 1980s, Star Wars and Indiana Jones seem to be two of the big ones that people are still talking about even 40 years later. And while my family did have the first two, I mean, The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones on VHS growing up, and we also have got the DVDs of Revenge of the Sith through to Return of the Jedi. Uh, the Indiana Jones films were ones that pretty much just kind of passed me by. I mean, I did grow into the franchise later with the likes of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and then I think last year or the year before, Dial of Destiny. But the Indiana Jones films were really only things that came on TV every once in a while, to which I'd watch bits of them, but I never actually watched the entire thing, at least not the originals. And the Indiana Jones franchise seems to be ones that's fairly divisive about which films are actually good and which films are actually bad. From what I've gathered, Raiders and Crusade seem to be the two that people genuinely agree are good. I've seen people go back and forth on Temple of Doom, whether it's actually a good film or whether it's not. Many people seem to agree that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was bad, but then after the release of Dial of Destiny, people seem to think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull isn't as bad as Dial of Destiny, but I don't know. I've done a review on Dial of Destiny, which I'll put up somewhere here if I remember to. But I felt maybe it was time I actually got into this franchise and actually started watching it through for myself. I can't talk about it a whole lot because, well, people have talked about these films to death and what masterpieces or unmasterpieces they already are. But I thought there are three facts about the film that most people already know, but I should bring up as well. For those who maybe have been living under a rock for the last 40 years, uh, in the first Indiana Jones film, Raiders of the Lost Ark, was released in 1981. Starred Harrison Ford as Dr. Henry Jones, or as he's best known, Indiana Jones, as he's an archaeologist who mainly seeks for various items around the world. And in this particular film, he is looking for an ancient relic called the Ark of the Covenant, which is seemingly said to contain the text that Moses brought down containing the Ten Commandments. However, he teams up with an old flame named Marion Ravenwood, played by Karen Allen, and another old friend named Salah, played by John Rhys Davies, and they seek to ultimately find the Ark and bring it for museums to study. However, they are pursued by a rival archaeologist named René Belloc, played by Paul Freeman, and members of the Gestapo and other particular. I'm not entirely sure you're allowed to say it on YouTube at the minute, but a certain party was prevalent in Europe around the 1940s, around the late 1930s and early 1940s, with, as I said, Major Arnold, another named Major Arnold Toht, played by Ronald Lacey. And one of the first small facts that you may or may not know about the first film is that apparently Harrison Ford was not the original first choice to play Indiana Jones. Supposedly, the one of the directors of the film, George Lucas, he didn't want to use Ford again, having already worked with Ford on Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. Maybe he just didn't want to use him again, not because Ford was a bad actor, but I think because he wanted to branch out a little bit and he wanted to use an actor who possibly wasn't as well known. Several big names did pop up, I believe seeing Bill Murray amongst that list, but the one that he actually had his heart set on was Tom Selleck, who I've heard different versions of this story, but supposedly they wanted Tom Selleck, but Tom Selleck had recently filmed the pilot for a TV show in the 1980s, Magnum PI, and couldn't get out of his contract to do the film. I've also heard a varying account that Tom Selleck used the fact that he'd been offered the part of Indiana Jones to gain him a higher salary on Magnum PI, and ultimately he couldn't do the film because of that. After that, Ford was suggested and George Lucas agreed, and the rest, as they say, with Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, is history. But it's not surprising these days when certain actors are pitched for certain directors' films. For example, nowadays, Noah Sagan, an actor, appears in a lot of Rian Johnson's movies, particularly the 3 Knives Out films. And with James Gunn's films, Nathan Fillion quite often appears. I know he had a voice role in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. He had a poster cameo in Guardians Volume 2 that was ultimately cut. He popped up again in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and then also made appearances as TDK, one of the members of Task Force X in The Suicide Squad, and also popped up in Superman as Guy Gardner, one of the Green Lanterns. So, while Lucas may not have wanted to reuse Ford at this point in time, these days it's not unusual for certain directors to cast certain actors over and over again. Now, the second fact about the film that you probably know by now is that you may remember partway through the film when they're in Cairo and Marion has been kidnapped by members of the party, that Indy is suddenly faced with a man with a sword. The man swirls the sword around and is about to fight him when Indy just takes out a gun and shoots the guy. Now, apparently there was supposed to originally be a sword fight between Indy and the swordsman at this point in the film. However, around the time on that day, Harrison Ford wasn't feeling very well. Like, I think he had something wrong with him, I'm not entirely sure what. And he asked the director, look, can I just shoot the guy and we can get on with this? And they're like, yeah, all right. So he shot him, but apparently Harrison Ford felt so bad about this and the fact that he'd kind of just ruined this guy's scene that he actually paid for the actual stuntman, paid his entire salary. At least that's what I've heard. It may not be true, but there you go. And the third element of this film that I'm sure almost everybody knows by now, I was introduced to this by the Big Bang Theory episode, Season 7, Episode 4, The Raiders Minimization from 2013, because as Amy points out in this episode, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones is technically irrelevant to the overall outcome of the story, because if you remove him from the film, while it would be a lot less entertaining, the outcome would be the same. The party would find the Ark of the Covenant, they would take it to the island, they would open it up, and everyone would die. So, you can't really argue with that these days, especially with the internet. But, still, I do still think this is an enjoyable film, even 40 years later. I mean, I know that the later Indiana Jones films, particularly Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny, they've certainly had some criticism over the years, but the original from back in 1981 still serves remarkably well. I mean, apparently George Lucas and the others, they wanted to create a film that was similar to like the action-adventure serials that they had in like the early 20th century, and they did a really good job with this. My original introduction properly to the Indiana Jones franchise was the 2008 Lego Indiana Jones The Original Adventures game. And I remember playing that game and having a lot of fun with it. And watching through the film, the Lego game did capture a lot of it, but then there were also elements that when I watched the film, I was surprised about. For example, Salah, playing the film by John Rhys Davies, I could tell he was a friend of Indy's and the like, but I just kind of felt after they left the Ark of the Covenant out, he just kind of disappeared from the rest of the story. Until earlier today when I looked back through the Lego cutscenes from the game and realised, no, actually he did turn up later on to help them out. And like the film, it's the same, that while he is captured by that party, he does later return to help Indy and Marion out. I do also like that they bring in a character played by George Harris, Captain Simon Katanga. He's the captain of the Bantu Wind, the ship that Indy and Marion briefly began to travel on when attempting to transport the Ark. And while I kind of watched it first and they said, yeah, no, we killed Indiana Jones, I mean, what use is he now? I didn't like that they were actually lying to try and get lying to the members of the party to kind of keep Indy safe. And then when they see him clamber aboard the German U-boats, everyone's cheering for him, and I really like that. Also, I was surprised to find Alfred Molina in this film. I mean, I saw his name in the opening credits and thought, Alfred Molina's in this? for those who may not know, he later went on to voice Elsa's father in the second Frozen film, and is best known these days for playing the villain Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man No Way Home. So again, watch him in this. And then when I saw he was Satipo, one of the explorers who Jones is kind of traveling on in the kind of prologue of the film, I was like, oh, cool. Cool, he's in this. I was a bit surprised when he died so soon, given especially in the game that, since it has to be two-player, he later meets up with Belloc to betray Indy. I will also admit I did like that Belloc was in more of this film, and in the game, in the Lego game when I played it, I know you can't gather too much because it is just characters going or mumbling. It was nice to see he was actually in more of the film than I thought when I originally played the Lego game. But yeah, I personally thought that he was just kind of in the prologue and then that was it. He was just kind of there and then he was gone. But it is nice to see him in more of the film. So, Raiders of the Lost Ark, it holds up surprisingly well, even 40 years later. And I do see why it's a fan favourite for a lot of people. Does it have problems? Well, yes, but then it also has the enjoyable parts. And as I said, the three main facts I know about it are Tom Selleck was originally supposed to be Indiana Jones, but had to back out. There was supposed to be a sword fight until Harrison Ford fell ill, so he just shot him. And also that Indiana Jones is not relevant, technically, to the climax of the film, but he's still enjoyable to be there. I will also admit I felt sorry for the monkey when it died. I mean, I shouldn't, because that monkey was working for the bad guys, but when it ate the plums and died, showing Indy and Sal that the plums were poisoned, I felt bad for that monkey. I mean, it's still an animal, and while it did bad things, I still felt sorry for it. But I will say, Raiders of the Lost Ark still holds up very, very well. Does it have problems? Sure, but what film from the 1980s doesn't nowadays? And I hope soon to do another review on Temple of Doom and maybe also The Last Crusade. But until then, that's my quick little review of Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1981. Anyway, until next time, see ya.